When it comes to the future of the profession, this is our moment. The next 3 to 5 years will be the most important in the history of the profession. And so I think, the spotlight is on, and all the information and resources and training, everything you need is there and available for you. It's going to require a mindset of leading through adaptability and demonstrating that to the organization that you lead, and remembering that you own or you control so many of the levers that have an impact in terms of recruit the people you bring into the organization, how you develop people, how you reward people, how you promote people, how you engage in leadership development. All of those are within our control. And I think those are really, really powerful tools to shape the modern organization and future-proof your companies. And so when you think about deciphering what you control versus what you don't, you're in a position of strength and tremendous opportunity that you control a lot of the pieces that will set your organization up for success.
Andy, welcome to the show. How are you, my friend?
Yeah, doing really well. Friday here when we're recording, so got the weekend coming up, but doing
Nice.
really well. Yeah, in a good spot right now.
Any plans for the weekend?
Yeah, so we've got two kiddos. I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old, and so we're at that point in life where your schedule is a little bit more dictated by your family than yourself. But good stuff: soccer games, birthday parties.
Nice.
Probably try to take them to a park, go for a hike. So yeah, try to get outdoors as much as possible with them.
Amazing. So I've got one 6-year-old and I can barely keep up. So what's the key to manage a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old?
You gotta let go a little bit. I think I'm a little bit of a control freak sometimes, and I think you gotta be okay with the mess and things being unplanned or going unscheduled. You gotta let them lead, and so I think with two of them, the highs are higher in terms of when it's going really well. It's like, hey, they're getting along, everything's smooth, hunky dory, and then when the lows are low, it's like, hey, they're fighting, they're not getting along. Like you got to play referee and break them apart. But
Yeah.
it's really neat to watch them grow up and have each other. I think that that's really special, watching that relationship form and
No.
bud. And it's something that, yeah, they're two sisters, and I grew up in a family with two boys, and I have a sister. It's just neat, that special bond that sisters form, and watching that start to come to life a little bit is pretty special.
Nice. By the way, the entire analogy you just said is like the perfect analogy for you as a chief transformation officer. If you think
Yeah,
about
a
that,
little bit. Things
right?
change a little bit day to day.
Yeah, things change day to day. They fight a little bit sometimes. Like, there's a lot of change. You got to let go a little bit. So,
Yeah,
some good advice for everyone
I think
listening.
sometimes, Chris, you know this, like sometimes the hardest thing is trying to isolate what you control versus what you don't. And where you get yourself into a spot is assuming you've got control over something that you don't and burning energy there or burning calories there, versus maybe there is something that you've got control over that you're ignoring or not prioritizing. And I think that that's a major part of, well, this job and almost any job out there right now, because there's just so many externalities and internal realities that people are dealing with. That ability to separate what you can control for versus kind of what's just noise on the outside, that you gotta put the blinders on. I think that's a real challenge for leaders and employees today.
Yeah, I mentioned obviously that you're the chief transformation officer for Sherm. When people ask you, "Hey, Andy, what do you do? How do you describe your role?"
It's a good question.
To
It's
people.
not a title that I think has historically shown up everywhere, but I would say, I'll give you some context, right? So about 2.5 years ago, the SHRM board and our CEO, Johnny C. Taylor, sat down and they looked at where they were in a position of strength in a lot of ways. Also recognized that the world is changing really quickly, and there's a lot going on, both in business and society and also in HR. And they made the strategic decision to make a significant investment into transforming SHRM. In a lot of ways, it's extending on what we're really good at and building on what we do really well. And in a lot of other ways, it's, hey, there's some spots and opportunities that we see as if we don't put these in place or make these investments, those external kind of factors are going to start to become internal realities. And we want to get ahead of that and make some investments in our people, processes, and technology. And so, I came in and got to meet with Johnny and the board and had a lot of conversations about the future of SHRM and where we want it to go, and found that we were all hyper aligned. And so I've been in role for just over a year now, and we've implemented a lot of change, a lot of investment, And we're just starting to set up a foundation so that we've been around for 76 years and trying to put things in place so that we're around another 76 years.
Yeah. No, there's a reason you've been around that long.
Yeah.
Right? And that's for innovation and change and transformation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think innovation and change are like two hallmarks of SHRM. I think we've made a lot of progress in driving innovation and change specifically over the past 5 or 7 years, I would say, and more to come there. But I think underlying the innovation and change is when we talk about it internally at SHRM, and also, when Johnny talks about it, externally, it's a lot of it's predicated on trust, right? SHRM occupies this really unique position where we are kind of the objective resource for what's going on in the profession. Where do we see emerging trends? How are we equipping HR professionals with tools and skills to be ready for those changes as best they can? The other thing that we do is we do a lot of advocacy work around workers, and workplace. And so constantly, in DC and other national capitals around the world advocating for policies. And so I think we really occupy this space where we're not necessarily driven by commercial interest, but really around what's the best thing for elevating HR, which is our purpose.
Yeah. There's so much, I think now more than ever, there's so much disruption and change
Yeah.
coming at us, especially the HR profession in every single direction. What does sort of modern transformation look like for companies right
How
now?
much time do we have to talk about it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you and I have spoken a number of times, Chris, and I think like this is one where, we used to isolate like HR transformation from business transformation or
Yeah.
operational transformation or culture transformation. Like the lines are just gone now, right? Between all of those different types of transformation. And so I think what you're watching happen in real time is businesses completely reinvent themselves in a digital AI enabled age. And that's having knockdown impacts on, again, people and process. And, HR no longer can kind of just look internally in terms of how are we advancing our HR tactics or strategies or approaches. It's really a function of the blurring between business and HR coming together in a completely integrated way. And HR, frankly, taking the driver's seat in a lot of these technology changes that are hitting the business and having a perspective on, one, how is this technology going to affect workforce planning? What are we going to do from an org design perspective to set our companies up to be able to adopt this technology and utilize it? And what does that mean for capabilities and headcount? Those are no longer just isolated to HR. And now I think business leaders have a real keen interest in understanding, like, how do I look 6 months down the road and know what my org structure is going to look like, my reporting relationships, the type of skills I need. And so they're asking all the questions that HR traditionally asked of them, except, they're coming to the table with a pretty strong point of view because it's impacting their business.
Mhm. What does this mean for the modern day HR leaders?
Adaptability. I think incredibly adaptable in terms of you don't know what's going to hit your desk day to day. You don't know what is going to be on the other side of the phone when you pick it up. And it could range anywhere from, hey, there's a new technology that's completely disrupted the business model, and you have to help us figure out how we go recruit for the skills or build the skills internally to respond to that. And I need you to hire faster. I need you to higher quality candidates. And by the way, they need to have skills that we haven't necessarily recruited for, so you don't have talent pipelines for those. So I think that that's one space where HR, just the variety of challenges that are coming their way is going to be really overwhelming, and adaptability is going to be essential. But two, I think they're going to have to be subject matter experts on this technology. And when I say this technology, I'm referring primarily to AI. Like they need to have a very mature, sophisticated perspective on what that's going to do, not only to the people side of the ledger, but to the business side of the ledger, and proactively come to the table with solutions about, hey, look, here's the business problem that you're describing. We have an alternative perspective on that in terms of what that means from a skills and capabilities lens, and be able to engage in that strategic conversation. And, we've talked about strategic HR for decades.
Yeah.
And I think technology is kind of bringing it off the sidelines and putting it front and center and saying like, you're going to have to come to the table with a really strong point of view and an educated opinion and recommendation about what the business should do as we think about implementing the new technologies.
with the pace of change moving so quickly, and I remember some of the stuff we're doing with AI. We spoke about this a couple of years ago that we thought were going to take 10, 20 years. It's already here, right?
Yeah.
How do you and the team at Sherm or ensure that you stay ahead and help prepare the HR leaders and HR professionals for this ever evolving future of work? I don't even like. I won't even say the word future of work because the future is already
Yeah.
here. We're like we're,
The
we're,
now of
we're,
work.
we're the now of work. Yeah, it doesn't sound as good, but the now of work.
Yeah. So I grew up my career in management consulting, and my primary focus when I started my career was in change management. And so led a lot of system implementation programs. And in those projects, it was very formulaic in terms of the approach to change management, right? It was, hey, go live is in 6 months. We got to get the company ready for go live. We're going to build the training out. We're going to build the communication out. We're going to build a stakeholder engagement plan out. And it was all like you could look at it on a calendar, and then it was like this checklist approach to change management. I'm sure, you've lived that life as well.
Yeah,
And I think that it's really helpful because you learn the fundamentals and the mechanics of change management of what actually drives behavior change. And so you get some experience with like these are the different tactics you can deploy. But that was in a world where like we could see the change coming in a lot of ways. I think like that all just completely that script got flipped right when ChatGPT got released for general availability to everybody. And like there was virtually no change management associated with the deployment of that tool. And so now, like, there is no calendar for change management, right? There is no formulaic change plan. And so, how do you respond to that as a company? At SHRM, it's really about building in change agility. And I think it's getting really crystal clear on our strategy, who are the audiences that we serve, right? And what do we owe them? And what are we trying to drive in terms of behavior change or supporting them? So, like, getting hyper crisp on our audiences. I think step two is getting our company to be really mature when it comes to data and making data-driven decisions. That doesn't always mean that like the data is the answer, but it's your starting point to say, if this is the audience that SHRM serves, what data do we know about them in terms of what they want, what they don't know they want, and then how do we build product services solutions to be able to support them in that? And building those org capabilities and those muscles internally, that actually allows you to be really dynamic and flexible. So I think instead of, me showing the company, hey, here's when you're going to get this email, here's when you're going to attend this lunch and learn or this brown bag session or fireside chat, right? Like all the things that we would historically associated with change management, that's happening dynamically week to week of like, what does the company need right now? What are we seeing in terms of the employee engagement data where they have questions or they need answers? And it's a mindset, it's a complete mindset shift, right? So I'll give you an example. Last week, we internally released a generative AI tool, Sherm GPT, internally to our employees. And what we did was we used it as an opportunity to drive that change agility to say, look, this tool is not perfect, right? Be really honest out of the gate. Like, this is the worst this tool will be. But in order for it to get better, we need your feedback and input, and we're going to iteratively, continuously improve it over time. And I think going through that experience and actually having them like firsthand share feedback, see us respond in the roadmap, deliver that functionality, that is the lived experience that's going to change behavior versus just talking about these org capabilities at a high level in a meeting of we need you to be audience centric, we need you to be data driven decision makers, like actually allowing them to see what that looks like in practice and modeling that and recognizing it. We're seeing a lot of traction there, and it's changing the culture and it's changing the mindset within the organization.
yeah. Part of that is I like the idea of what you said at the beginning around sort of agile transformation.
Yeah,
When people talk to me about, oh, I've got my 3 year plan or my 5 year plan, I'm like, man, like if you if
I
you
know.
if you know that far ahead, tell me something because I didn't know you could see that far.
It takes a lot of courage to put a 5-year plan on the board, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
just
I mean, you kind of have to put a direction. I get that, but I mean, but there needs to be, it's like building a startup. Like I started
yeah,
here, I go here, but the journey's been up and down, like right,
totally.
up, down, left, right, and center. It's not a straight journey to where you need to be. So having an agile mindset to be able to adapt to those constantly opposing forces that are coming at every direction, you have to be able to
Got to.
have that. And
And I
that,
think like
go on, sorry.
you and I are wired very similarly, I think, on this, which is, too much agility is chaos, right? Because you can't just be in a full reaction mode. And so I like to call it, or we call it internally structured agility,
Okay,
which is like
nice.
what is the decision framework as things come our way that we're going to use to filter against like, because we could do a lot of different things, right? We could launch new products, services, right? And I think companies get into this trap of being overly agile, and what happens is then prioritization becomes a challenge because you've got all these competing things that you're trying to do, and it just spreads you too thin. And so we talk a lot about internally of like structured agility, where hey, a lot of good ideas on the table. We got to radically prioritize them so that we don't diffuse the energy of our resources and time and investments. And to your point, like you've got to have guiding principles that sit underneath where you're going and use those to be that decision filter versus, hey, anything that comes our way, we're going to consider it on a case by case basis. And you could start running in place pretty quickly.
Yeah, we talk about it internally as like having our the foundation like the foundation is our principles, and within that framework we can make decisions. Because even when you have a lot of uncertainty and change, like the pandemic, when we were like, we've lost 100% of our revenue because we did mainly it was face-to-face event revenue. Like, how do we
Right.
digitize? Rather than like reacting to the news and like our government and everything's going on, we kind of looked at our core principles and just ignore all the chaos. Because if you kind of get caught up in that, then you get lost. And then we made a decision based on that, and that's like constantly keep us grounded, and doesn't, because if you go too far off, then you kind of lose the essence of what made your business special in the first place. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
And you
uh,
also like when things start going well, you don't necessarily know what's working, but then when conversely like things start to get on the rumble strips, you don't know what's broken and how to fix it because you've made all these independent reactive
yeah,
decisions. And I think that that's where you can get yourself into a tough spot is like if you're chasing the headlines and that you're using that as like your planning mechanism, you're going to really struggle. And you may see short-term wins or short-term gains, but to your point, longevity wise, like if you don't have that foundation set up that you can always refer back to of like what makes you unique and special, you kind of become identityless.
yeah. Like we always one of the things we always come back to is like, are we doing the basics to a high standard consistently? I forget like
Precisely.
forget about all of the new shiny objects, new tools and
Precisely.
technologies. Like, let's start there. We can add on top maybe from there, but like at the very minimum, like, are we doing the basics to a high standard consistently?
Yeah.
Honestly, if most people just took that and focus on that every day within whatever industry they or whatever product they sell, that will take you a long way. I heard that. It's funny. I heard that at a conference when I was like 17,
Yeah, is that
and
right? Yeah, and it
20
endures,
years
doesn't it?
20
It's
years later,
remarkable.
I
Yeah.
remember the guy on stage, and he was like, if you're an entrepreneur here, all I want you to take away from my presentation is, are you ask yourself every day, am I doing the basics to a high standard consistently? And 20 years later, it stuck with me. Like, it
Yeah.
literally was ingrained. I was like, wow. And I always say that to the team. And you look at everything, the product, marketing, sales, editing,
Yeah.
are we doing, like, we just look at it, just, it's incredible what you can achieve if you just do that.
I think a
Yeah.
very underrated organizational capability is sustained focus.
Yeah.
How good is your organization at sustaining focus on the priorities and guiding principles? Yeah,
It's
I think it's a
tough.
very underrated capability.
Yeah, it's tough because it's so easy to be pulled in different directions and react to the new trend and buzzword of the
Completely. It takes
day.
a lot of discipline. I think that's another one is just do you have the discipline to stick to your guiding principles, when things get a little bit tough? And I think it really challenges organizations. And the environment that we're in right now, I think is going to only amplify if there's cracks in the dam, it's only going to amplify some of those because if you don't have that foundation built, you're going to be, in constant reaction mode.
Yeah. The other thing my boss used to say to me all the time is I used to run in her office when I was younger with all these amazing ideas, and I thought I was gonna completely, like, I was like so excited and one was just really wanted to impress my CEO
Yep.
at the time, and she was like, Chris, like, she appreciated the enthusiasm. She was like, Chris, ask yourself this, and it was something along the lines of like, is what you're doing, saying, thinking right now getting you close to achieving the goal? And if
Precisely.
the answer is no, get back to work. And she said it pretty bluntly to me. So
I don't know about you.
I was
Yeah,
like,
how do you?
whoa. I was like, so now I asked myself, like, and that even comes down to like, even if I'm negatively talking, if I have negative self talk, or like,
Yeah,
I'm not sleeping well. Like, I take that to every facet of my life. Like, is what I'm doing, saying, thinking, getting me closer to my goal? If not, stop talking negatively to yourself. Stop
yeah.
blaming the world. Like, make that
Control
higher.
what you can
Yeah,
control.
yeah, exactly. That was really empowering. At the time, I was like, oh, I just got shot down. But then probably a couple of years later, I was like, that was really good advice that
No.
I got in that meeting.
Some
Yeah.
of those leadership principles, yeah, they don't make sense until 10 or 15 years later when
No.
you've been through
Yeah.
the rep to realize that there was a lot of wisdom packed into some of those things you caught early in your career. And I think a question I have for you is, you live in the Gen AI space. Like,
Yeah.
you want to talk about an idea generation machine. Like,
Mm.
I think it's going to be really interesting how companies handle employees being able to generate ideas really quickly and build business plans and build new concepts or innovative solutions to things, and the volume that's going to come through the organization of new ideas. Are you all seeing that? I mean, is that something that you've
Yeah. I
experienced?
don't think there's a member of my team who's not
Yeah,
using ChatGPT or Atlas in our case, because we're lucky to have our own AI co-pilot that we've built. We're using it in the production team to help build the content for our events. So
yeah,
what would take typically months to research and build a program, you could do literally in a matter of minutes, because you
yeah,
can draw from thousands of pieces of research and content, and within seconds saying, hey, draw this up into some key themes for the program, and actually who are the companies that are doing incredible work in this space. And then within minutes you've got another list of like, here are all the companies that are doing amazing work in people analytics, or whatever.
sure.
So things that would normally take months,
I know.
in our editing team, we can use AI to generate anything at this point, like in terms of video, graphics. Like, you can use AI to edit. So like, I feel like you got to create a sandbox. Don't go
Yeah.
completely free range. So we have a sandbox that they can play in, and then we just, in our Monday calls, we just make space for people to share. Like, there was a manual task that was taking the team a couple of hours recently, that we figured out how to write a correct script that could do what was taking probably like 8-9 hours a week, that just
Yeah.
now does it in seconds. Like, because someone
We've got like a
because
ton
someone
of
was
case studies
like,
internally on that, and
yeah,
it is amazing and it's super powerful to grab those efficiencies. And then, you get this time give back. And I think out of some of that time give back, new ideas. I really like that concept you're talking about of an idea sandbox almost of,
yeah.
hey, great idea generation space, but we've got to be really disciplined about what comes into the system
But
because we
again,
can't
that's what we
over.
said before, though.
Yeah.
Is it getting is it aligned with? So first, the question, right? Is it aligned with our principles?
Yep.
And is it getting us close to achieving our goal? If the answer is no, if the answer is no, then it could be really cool and really exciting, but we can't get distracted. And
Precisely.
I've literally had whole entire other business ideas that I've generated that I could put into action and generate revenue within weeks, and that's not exaggerating. And I'm like, oh, that's so tempting and so exciting
It's very
to
tempting.
run down that new rabbit hole. And Shane will reel me back in, my co-founder, will be like, all right, Chris, like, and I'm like, oh, because that's kind of what part of my side of the business is, our product, so I get really excited, but you just can't. Like, people respect HR leaders because we've consistently put out 2 podcasts a week for 8 years,
Right.
one and a half
Consistency.
thousand episodes,
Yeah.
like, consistent. And and what do you see? It started in my bedroom and now we're in the studio. And why is that? Because we're doing the basics to a higher standard consistently and constantly, in reinvesting into the product, which is, in our sense, content and events. And in many ways, we share that a lot in common with Sherm in that
Yeah.
sense. So we're always like, people are like, why did you guys build a TV studio? And why do you, put so much effort into putting together your events around the world in the way you do? I'm like, because we want it's the experience. And we're
Yeah.
constantly taking feedback from our community and reinvesting it into what we do. And there's loads of other things that we could have done, but I've like just doubled down on making this the best podcast I can, and if I can constantly improve it. as well.
I think, and
So
that's probably, a key secret active ingredient of the success you've had, right? Is just your ability to stay focused and disciplined and
it's
do the
really hard.
fundamentals incredibly. It's really hard, and it's only
Yeah.
going to get harder, Chris. I think that's where we consult with a lot of organizations. And I think HR, you were asking earlier about like what does that future role look like, or what does the HR leader? I think prioritization is going to be a real key, and also leadership development of do we have leaders within the organization who are able to be disciplined and stick to the strategy, the guiding principles, so that we don't diffuse our resources. Because we talk a lot about the labor shortage and we talk about access to skills and talent, and I think if you accept that premise that, yeah, you're going to have just fewer humans by numbers, the reality is AI can do a lot, but where are all these ideas going to go if you don't have enough people to execute upon them? And if the system is already somewhat constrained by the resources you have, depending on how soon you think agents are going to get here, how is that work going to get executed and done? And what is that going to do in terms of all the enabling functions? How are you going to market it? How are you going to, do the finance associated with it, the technology associated with all these ideas that are coming through the org? I think HR is going to have to be a bit of a prioritization leader in terms of what is important to the organization culturally and what are our guiding principles and what's our strategy. And that's where I say it is just totally, wiped out the silos between all these different enabling functions, core operations and HR, IT, legal. It's all coming together in a very integrated way.
Yeah. With everything we just said, we can't we can't forget that the impact now that what that's going to mean for employee experience,
Yeah,
because we're
right.
fundamentally the way in which we work has changed more in the last 3 4 years than it has in the last 100. Right.
Okay.
Like I was laughing, I
And
was
it
saying,
will continue to.
yeah,
Yeah.
like I was saying to my wife, when Robin's older, my daughter, and your kids are older, they may laugh at the idea that you had to go to an office to do your work. So wait a minute, Daddy. You used to go 5 days a week into this place to open a laptop and do work that you could have done in the house. Like, why did you? Why did people do that, Dad? Like,
It's like the
like,
idea of taking your briefcase, right?
yeah, yeah,
You get a yellow legal pad that you're working off of.
yeah. They're gonna be so confused, right? And I can only imagine where we'll be when they're older, in
Yeah.
terms of where work gets done. So, what do you think this means for employee experience?
So I think that agility piece, like, I think that's critical, right? You gotta build agility into your organization from a mindset perspective, but I also think it's going to be, managing workload for employees where AI will absolutely unlock efficiencies for people, right? And we talk a lot about, removing the administrative work and creating the more percentage of your time that you're going to spend on things that you like doing, that engage you, that actually tap into the skills you uniquely have or possess. But I think then the question becomes is how do you direct those resources so that you are giving them a reasonable workload that's achievable without burning them out? And I think that you're going to see burnout start, ironically, you're going to start to see
I've
burnout
seen
numbers
it
creep up.
because people,
Yeah,
like, instead of replacing that time, those saved hours, into spending more time with your people or your
right.
customers, they're just adding more work. You have to be intentional about now what we're doing and how we're leveraging that, like, extra time. Because if I've saved 8 hours, like I said, on that process, what am I doing with that saved 8 hours? If I'm just jumping back into some more manual work, it's like
Right.
defies the point
Right.
of that, right? As well. So that's gonna, and I think most companies, this is a brand new. We've never had this before.
Yeah.
I think people are still figuring that bit out.
It's that like with great power comes great responsibility, right? And so like if you can give your employees tools that allow them to do more faster, you got to be really careful that if you stack too many priorities and too many initiatives on
Yes,
them. And I think one thing that's really interesting that we really try to stay true to at Sherm, which is always being conscientious of, in a lot of ways, the customer experience is really a reflection of the internal operations of an
100%.
organization, right? And I think that that's pretty self-evident. And so if you think about a world where employees have a lot of competing priorities or they have a lot of initiatives they're trying to pursue at once, how is that going to come through to the customer, both from a marketing perspective and from an experience perspective? And when you talked earlier about what's the nature of transformation look like today and what's it going to look like tomorrow, I think a lot of it is going to be companies who are able to figure out this balance between maximizing the power of integrating their functions and teams using technology to create a better customer experience, whatever your audience or customer is, versus those who are going to overwhelm their internal employees and functions. And that's going to come through in, potentially a chaotic experience on the other side for customers.
Yeah.
And so I think that is, you'll start to see it show up in customer experience numbers first. And then when you trace it backward, it's really the internal complexity that we've created within these companies by giving these tools to employees without enough structured agility to kind of keep them between the lines.
Do you? It's a bit of a strange question, but do you feel a responsibility? Given SHRM is the world's largest association for HR professionals, you're
Yeah.
kind of carrying that, right? That shared responsibility.
Yeah, we talk about it a lot, right? Is the future of the profession, where it's going, what are the skills that are needed today versus what are the skills that are going to be required tomorrow? And I think in a lot of ways you see the services that we provide or to our members, giving them access to, it's not so much necessarily how do you use AI better as an HR professional, but how do you get smart on AI so that you can enable the business? And how do you lead the charge in terms of implementing AI within your organization and doing it in a structured, intelligently designed way? So I was telling you about SHRM GPT that we launched internally. So I lead our technology function at SHRM. I worked day in and day out with our CHRO on the design, development, and deployment of that tool because it's all people implications in terms of adoption, usage, employee experience you hit on, right? And so, you know, his ability to be really smart on the technology, think through the people implications of that, and then I can come to the table with sort of these technology impacts that I foresee and our team is looking down the road at. But I didn't even think of him as working in HR, right? He's just a business leader that we're thinking about the impact on the organization.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really where it's going to go. And so, as SHRM, how do we scale that for our members? How do we make the HR professionals and HR leaders in organizations really feel like they are embedded within the business?
Yeah. Well, you have the perfect opportunity to role model that internally, like you said, and test that with the team, get everyone's feedback, and then roll that out. What are some of the, I mean, of course AI, but what are some of the other things that you're hearing from customers and SHRM members as some of the key priorities or challenges that they're facing?
Well, obviously, there's a lot of compliance questions coming in, right? We've had executive orders that have kind of changed the nature
Mm-hmm.
of some of the historical ways that we've operated, and so that's certainly an area that we're staying really focused on. I think, again, to your point about how you operate internally is reflected in the customer experience. For us, we're getting more real time in terms of providing member-only webinars, providing up-to-date resources, day in, day out, content that we're generating, research that we're doing, moving it much closer to real time, right? So we do have 340,000 members around the world. And how are we harvesting all of the information they're telling us about their experience, translating that really rapidly into research and thought leadership and content so that we can get out into the market? Here's what's going on the front lines of the profession. Here's our perspective on it. Here's what you can do about it, sharing those case studies, sharing those actual lived experiences of those individuals, whether that be in, again, content, research, webinars, because that is the pulse of HR, right? I mean, and we have a perspective on where the profession is going, but you also have to live in, like we were talking
In the
about
now.
earlier, you can't
Yeah.
get too far ahead of yourself. People need help today, right now. And so we've changed our operating model to operate in a much more real-time, agile fashion. So you'll continue to see that over time. And the wisdom of crowds is really powerful, right? And again, like you get 340,000 perspectives on the table and you run the analysis on that data, you start to see trends in terms of where the direction of the profession is headed. And yeah, it's a fun time to be in this space.
Yeah, no, definitely. That's why I always say it's tough, right? But there's never a better time. I feel like to be in this space. It's a really exciting time and a time where HR is really leading the charge, not in HR but in the business.
Yeah,
There is no HR I look at HR is the business and the business is HR, right? There is
one and the same.
they're one in the same. I'm tired of people talking about it as a separate. If the pandemic didn't show you that, nothing will. right?
Yeah.
Like, everyone looked to HR and was like, "What do we do?" Right? During that, and that's continued, right? With all of the other disruption and change that we've been facing, HR has truly been elevated. I don't think it. I think it already was there, but I feel like it kind of shine a spotlight more than ever. And I love the fact that you've recognized that at SHRM, and both internally and externally, you've become more agile to be more real time in how you're helping your members, because you can't give them a research or an event 2 months later, right?
Yeah, and this
They
old
need.
model, I mean, you probably remember, like I do, the old model of like once a year, a
Yeah,
company would release
yeah.
their 50-page white
It's
paper
too late.
PDF, and
It's
you
too,
got your highlighter and you're
yeah,
making notes in the margin. And that, again, you were talking about our kids' perception of our work today. I mean, I kind of think back even to my own experiences 5 years ago, and that was how I consumed information and how I made decisions as an HR leader was I'd print out the report and be manually going through it and thinking through the implications. And now we're as soon as that report is published, it's obsolete to some extent. And the half-life on it is accelerated. And so you just if that's the old model of research and thought leadership, it's just not sustainable or applicable or relevant in today's modern world.
yeah. Listen, before I let you go, what would be your parting advice for HR leaders listening, and also where can they connect with you if they want to reach out and say hi? And obviously, kind of they I don't think I need to tell them where to go for Sherm because they already know on that side.
Yeah,
But yeah,
when it comes to the future of the profession, like, this is our moment, right? I mean, this is the next 3 to 5 years will be the most important in the history of the profession. And so I think, the spotlight is on, and all the information and resources and training, everything you need is there and available for you. And it's it's going to require a mindset of leading through adaptability and demonstrating that to the organization that you lead, and remembering that you own or you control so many of the levers that have an impact in terms of recruit the people you bring into the organization, how you develop people, how you reward people, how you promote people, how you engage in leadership development. All of those are within our control. And I think those are really, really powerful tools to shape the modern organization and future-proof your companies. And so when you think about deciphering what you control versus what you don't, you're in a position of strength and tremendous opportunity that you control a lot of the pieces that will set your organization up for success.
I love that. Well, listen, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I wish you all the best until
Yeah.
next week. Thanks a lot.
Chris, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Love the work you're doing.
Thank you.